This guy knew Jack was a psychopath who used his strength as a weapon of death. And there's this guy, Jimmy Snuka, who snapped and murdered his girlfriend in cold blood.
We all get that wrestling is a wild and risky sport.
From accidental deaths in the ring to intentional homicide outside of it, these wrestlers let their superhuman strength do the thinking, and they paid dearly for it. Now let's begin with this monster of a man, the Great Khali.
Who is this guy? Oh, another right hand! Oh, what a chop!
The Great Khali, born Dalip Singh Rana, is a name that resonates with wrestling fans around the globe for his towering height and formidable presence in the ring. Before his rise to fame in World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, Khali was honing his craft in the less glamorous confines of wrestling schools, where the foundation for his future stardom was being laid. However, it was during this formative period that a tragic incident occurred, one that would cast a long shadow over his early career.
The pair began to rehearse a simple flapjack move where Rana would lift Ong above his head and drop him face first towards the mat.
The incident in question took place at All Pro Wrestling, APW, in California, where Khali was undergoing training. Brian Ong, a fellow trainee, was the unfortunate victim of a sequence of events that led to his untimely death. Ong had previously sustained a concussion during a training session, but despite this injury, the decision was made for him to continue participating, a decision that would prove to be fatal. During a practice session, Khali executed a flapjack, a move where the wrestler throws his opponent in the air before they land flat on the mat. Tragically, this resulted in a second concussion for Ong, one that he would not recover from. The severity of the impact and the lack of immediate medical attention led to Ong's condition deteriorating rapidly, and he passed away shortly thereafter. The aftermath of the incident was a storm of controversy and grief. Ong's family pursued legal action against APW, leading to a settlement of $1.3 million. Although the death was ruled accidental, the shadow of having inadvertently taken a life hung heavily over Khali. The world of wrestling, often perceived as a choreographed dance of titans, was reminded of its potential for real-world consequences. Khali's journey from this point was a challenging one, as he worked to rebuild his reputation and continue his career in the face of such a traumatic event. Eventually, he found his way to the WWE, where he achieved fame and success. Despite this, the incident with Brian Ong remains a somber chapter in his life story, a stark reminder of the fine line between performance and peril in the world of professional wrestling.
He was the high-flying superstar of wrestling.
But nothing prepares you for our next wrestler, whose tag as a killer came unexpectedly: Jimmy Snuka. It was not until many years after the murder case of a loved one that authorities linked Snuka to the crime. Who did he kill? Someone nobody believed he would ever hurt. Jimmy Superfly Snuka, with his high-flying maneuvers and charismatic presence, was a pioneer of aerial wrestling in WWE. His iconic leap from the top of a steel cage in Madison Square Garden in 1983 is etched in the annals of wrestling history. Snuka's daredevil style inspired a generation of wrestlers, but his legacy is overshadowed by a dark chapter that resurfaced decades later. In 1983, the same year as his legendary leap, Snuka's girlfriend, Nancy Argentino, suffered grievous injuries and subsequently died. At the time, the incident was shrouded in mystery, with Snuka claiming that Argentino had slipped and hit her head. Despite the suspicious circumstances and more than 24 cuts and bruises found on Argentino's body, the case was inconclusively closed, and Snuka continued his ascent to stardom. However, the case was not forgotten. In 2015, new evidence prompted authorities to reopen the investigation, and Snuka was charged with third-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. The wrestling world was rocked by the allegations against one of its stars. Snuka's trial, however, never concluded. He was found not competent to stand trial due to his deteriorating health, and the charges were dismissed shortly before he died in 2017. The accusations against Jimmy Snuka cast a long shadow over his contributions to wrestling. Fans never forgot his contributions, but they could not separate the murder smear from his persona. His aerial innovations and the Superfly persona are now intertwined with the tragic death of Nancy Argentino. Snuka's case shows the complexities behind the larger-than-life characters portrayed in the ring, where personal demons and past actions can haunt even the most celebrated of careers. Next is the bad guy who did some bad things to his opponents in the ring, which seemed fine until he took it outside the ring. Scott Hall. Scott Hall, known to wrestling fans as the bad guy.
In the AWA in 1985, when many saw Scott Hall on television for the first time. Looking back on it now, it's hard to believe Vince McMahon didn't sign him just on this vignette alone. Hall was big, handsome, athletic, all the things you would want in a good guy.
Was a charismatic and influential figure in the world of professional wrestling. His swagger and razor's edge finisher made him a favorite among fans, and his role in the formation of the New World Order, NWO, in WCW revolutionized the industry. Hall's portrayal of an anti-hero resonated with audiences, and his impact on the wrestling business is still felt today. However, Hall's life outside the ring was marked by personal struggles. Including battles with substance abuse. His issues with alcohol were well documented, often overshadowing his in-ring achievements. These struggles took a toll on his career, leading to various stints in rehabilitation facilities and affecting his tenure with major wrestling promotions. Adding to Hall's troubled history was a chilling incident from 1983 when he was charged with second-degree murder following a confrontation at a nightclub. According to Hall, it was a case of self-defense. He claimed the man he shot was attempting to rob him. The charges were eventually dropped due to lack of evidence, but the incident haunted Hall for years, contributing to his personal demons. Scott's personal life was fraught with challenges. The man who once stood at the pinnacle of the wrestling world faced a battle with his psyche, a fight that proved his toughest opponent. Thinking of a true killer whose most known profession was wrestling? Think Chris Benoit, a highly decorated fighter who took some ring steam where he least needed to a place called Home Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit, a wrestler renowned for his technical prowess and intensity, was widely regarded as one of the best in-ring performers of his generation. His career spanned multiple promotions, where he garnered numerous championships and accolades, culminating in a World Heavyweight Championship victory at WrestleMania XX, a pinnacle moment that solidified his legacy as a top-tier talent. Benoit's dedication to his craft was unmatched, and his matches were often lauded for their storytelling and technical excellence. He was respected by peers and fans alike for his commitment to wrestling, a passion that drove him to push the limits of physical endurance in the squared circle. However, in 2007, the wrestling world was rocked by a tragedy that would forever tarnish Benoit's name.
My name is Dennis Fagan. I run the security for World Wrestling, and one of our wrestlers that lives down there is...
Over a harrowing weekend in June, Benoit took the lives of his wife Nancy and their son Daniel before ending his own life. The incident sent shockwaves through the industry and beyond, prompting widespread media coverage and public scrutiny of the wrestling business. It sparked numerous theories and discussions about the potential contributing factors, including the pressures of the wrestling lifestyle, brain damage from repeated concussions, and the use of performance-enhancing substances. Benoit's actions led to a reevaluation of the health and wellness policies in professional wrestling, with a particular focus on the long-term effects of head injuries. His legacy, once defined by his in-ring achievements, is now overshadowed by the incomprehensible events of his final days. The wrestling community continues to grapple with the complex legacy of Chris Benoit, who is both a celebrated athlete and the center of one of the sport's most tragic episodes. Next up, we have a leading Japanese wrestler who made the wrong move at the wrong time in the right place. Akitoshi Saito. The name is etched in the annals of professional wrestling not for a scandalous act outside the ring, but for a tragic in-ring incident. That led to the untimely death of a fellow wrestler. Saito, a seasoned Japanese wrestler, was involved in a fateful match that would leave the wrestling community in mourning and raise questions about the risks inherent in the sport.
.99 隊の応急措置にもかかわらず意識が戻らない三沢さん。ついに
In June 2009, the wrestling world was focused on a tag team match for the GHC Tag Team Championships. Saito, alongside his partner, was pitted against the legendary Mitsuharu Misawa, a man revered in Japan and around the world for his contributions to professional wrestling. The match proceeded as many had before, with the athletes showcasing their skills and athleticism. However, a single move would change everything. Saito executed a backdrop on Misawa, a common maneuver in professional wrestling. Tragically, Misawa suffered a severe spinal injury from the move. Unbeknownst to Saito and the fans in attendance, Misawa had been wrestling with a pre-existing neck condition, which made him particularly vulnerable to such an impact. Misawa collapsed in the ring and was rushed to a local hospital, where he was pronounced dead later that night. Misawa was not only a peer, but a respected figure in the industry, and his death sent ripples of grief across the globe. For Saito, the incident was devastating. Despite the move being a routine part of his repertoire, and there being no malice in his actions, he struggled with the weight of the outcome. Fans, too, were left to grapple with the reality that the sport they loved could have such dire consequences. While Saito continued his career, the shadow of that fateful match lingered, opening a poignant chapter in the history of wrestling. This has left many to pay attention to how fragile life can be, especially despite their love for chaos in the ring. This time, we will look into the life of another wrestler killer whose intentions were premeditated and dangerously executed behind closed doors. Jose Gonzalez. Jose Gonzalez, better known in the wrestling world as Invader One, is a name that is forever linked to one of the most infamous and tragic events in professional wrestling history. The incident in question involves the death of Frank Goodish, who wrestled under the name Bruiser Brody, a beloved and imposing figure in the industry. The story of what transpired between Gonzalez and Brody is a harrowing tale that has been discussed and debated by wrestling enthusiasts for decades. The date was July 17, 1988, and the setting was a locker room in Bayamon, Puerto Rico. Brody, known for his wild brawling style and intense persona, was preparing for a match when Gonzalez, a fellow wrestler and booker for the promotion, requested to speak with him privately in the shower area, purportedly to discuss business. Moments later, a scuffle ensued, and screams echoed through the corridors. Wrestlers and staff rushed to the scene to find a critically wounded Brody, with Gonzalez standing nearby, holding a knife. Brody had suffered a severe abdominal stab wound and was quickly attended to by his peers as they awaited medical assistance. The delay in receiving proper medical care, coupled with complications from his injuries, led to Brody's death. Meanwhile, Gonzalez claimed self-defense, and the case was marred by allegations of mishandled evidence, witness intimidation, and a perceived lack of cooperation from local authorities. Consequently, Gonzalez was acquitted of murder charges in a 1989 trial, a verdict that has been met with skepticism and criticism within the wrestling community. Although Jose Gonzalez's career continued after the trial, the shadow of that fateful day in Puerto Rico never fully receded. Unlike Gonzalez, whose guilt was difficult to prove, there was sufficient evidence tying this 10-time AWA champ to the death of another. But was he convicted? Let's see. Vern Gagne.
For more than 4 decades, Vern Gagne was a legendary wrestler and promoter, and an instrumental figure in the expansion of sports entertainment.
Vern Gagne was a titan of professional wrestling, both as a celebrated athlete and a pioneering promoter. His influence extended far beyond the ring, shaping the sport through his work with the National Wrestling Alliance and the American Wrestling Association, AWA. Gagne was a technical maestro and a 10-time AWA World Heavyweight Champion, and his contributions to wrestling earned him the rare honor of being inducted into the WWE, WCW, and Professional Wrestling Halls of Fame. Despite his storied career, Gagne's later years were marked by a tragic incident that cast a shadow over his legacy. Suffering from dementia, Gagne was residing in a care facility when he was involved in a physical altercation with a fellow resident. The confrontation resulted in Gagne throwing the man to the floor, an action that led to a broken hip and ultimately the man's death. Gagne, once a symbol of strength and discipline, was now one who struggled with a disease that left him a shadow of his former self. The legal system recognized his diminished capacity, and he faced no charges for the incident. Undoubtedly, the incident at the care facility is a sad footnote in the life of a man who achieved so much, reminding us that even the greatest of heroes can face insurmountable challenges. This next wrestler was a man who achieved so little and wasn't able to manage his personal life well.
What you see right here, 6'9", 275 pounds.
His pro wrestling stage name in the WWE was The Future, but Brian McGee's looks pretty dim.
Brian McGee. Brian McGee, an aspiring wrestler with dreams of stardom, found his way into the WWE's developmental system, Florida Championship Wrestling, FCW, where he sought to hone his craft and make a name for himself. Despite his potential and dedication, McGee was unable to break through the ranks and was eventually released, a setback that derailed his professional aspirations. The end of McGee's tenure with FCW marked the beginning of a downward spiral. In 2013, he was thrust into the spotlight for all the wrong reasons when he was involved in a horrific incident that shocked the wrestling community. McGee fatally stabbed his girlfriend multiple times, a violent act that led to her untimely death. The gruesome nature of the crime was compounded by McGee's actions following the incident, as he engaged in a high-speed car chase with police before being apprehended. Adding to the macabre nature of the event, McGee disturbingly updated his social media with an image that seemed to reference the crime. Charged with first-degree murder, McGee's life took a drastic turn from the squared circle to a prison cell. The tragic event not only ended a life, but also marked the complete unraveling of a man who once had aspirations of wrestling glory. New Jack. New Jack's real name was Jerome Young, was a wrestler unlike any other, notorious for pushing the boundaries of violence in the ring. His reputation for hardcore wrestling was unparalleled, often blurring the lines between performance and actual combat. New Jack's time in Extreme Championship Wrestling, ECW, solidified his status as one of the most dangerous men in the industry, where he participated in matches that were as much bloodbaths as they were athletic contests. Before his wrestling career, New Jack claimed to have been a bounty hunter, an occupation that allegedly saw him involved in incidents that ended fatally. These claims contributed to his fearsome persona, a wrestler who didn't just play a tough guy on TV, but was genuinely to be feared. His time in ECW was marked by a series of controversial incidents, including the infamous mass transit incident, where an untrained and underage wrestler was severely injured at the hands of New Jack during an ECW event. The mass transit incident became a dark mark on New Jack's career and ECW's legacy. The young wrestler, who had lied about his age and experience, was left with grievous injuries following a match with New Jack, who took liberties with the inexperienced opponent. The incident led to legal action and further scrutiny of the extreme style of wrestling that New Jack epitomized. Despite the controversy, New Jack remained unapologetic about his in-ring style and the persona he embodied. His career continued in various promotions, always carrying with him the reputation of a man who lived his gimmick, a wrestler who was as unpredictable and dangerous in real life as he was during a match. New Jack's legacy in wrestling is complex, marked by moments of infamy and a style that challenged the very definition of professional wrestling.
He was becoming infatuated with heavy-set women and calling himself the Fat Chick Thriller. His gimmick was that he liked big women.
This brings us to another professional wrestler who knew that being a ladies' man wasn't a privilege for rock stars alone. Sadly, Awesome's end wasn't all that glorious, especially with his potential to kill. Mike Awesome. Mike Awesome, a name synonymous with power and dominance in the wrestling ring during the 90s, had a career that soared in the land of extreme, ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling. With his imposing stature and high-impact moves, Awesome captured the ECW heavyweight title multiple times, etching his name in the annals of hardcore wrestling history. His journey through the wrestling promotions was a testament to his talent as he grappled in the rings of ECW, UCW, World Championship, Wrestling, and eventually WWE. But it was in ECW where Mike Awesome truly shone, becoming a main eventer and a fan favorite for his relentless style and ability to endure and dish out punishment in equal measure. However, the transition to WWE marked the beginning of a downward spiral for Awesome's career. Unable to replicate the success he found in ECW, his star began to dim. After a few years wrestling in the independent circuit, Awesome decided to hang up his boots in 2006, retiring from the sport he had dedicated his life to. The year following his retirement was a dark period for Mike Awesome. Struggling with mental health issues, his life took a tragic turn. On February 17, 2007, friends discovered him hanging inside his home, a victim of suicide. Despite WWE's complicated relationship with Awesome, they honored him after his passing. Truly, the cheers of the crowd will always fade, but that doesn't stop the battle with one's inner demons, as it can become the toughest fight of all.
On YouTube,
maybe Ernie Ladd Riot. Maybe.
Ernie Ladd, Cleveland Riot, but the f***ing heart punches that Ox was hitting Ernie.
But how did fans come to terms with the realization that their favorite wrestler, Ox Baker, was once accused of the deaths of two wrestlers? Let's examine this man, Ox Baker. Ox Baker, with his fearsome appearance and towering presence, was an unforgettable figure in the wrestling world. His trademark bushy eyebrows and handlebar mustache made him an intimidating sight, and his in-ring persona was that of a brutal competitor. Baker's finishing move, the Heart Punch, was as notorious as his look, a move that he claimed could stop a man's heart with its sheer force. The move became infamous in the early 1970s when tragedy struck not once, but twice. In 1971, during a match, Baker delivered his feared Heart Punch to Alberto Torres. Torres, unbeknownst to all, had been wrestling with a serious medical condition. 3 days after the match, he succumbed to a ruptured appendix, an event that coincidentally followed the receipt of Baker's finisher. The wrestling community was shaken, and the Heart Punch was scrutinized as a potentially lethal maneuver. The following year, another wrestler, Ray Gunkel, faced a similar fate after a match with Baker. Gunkel collapsed and later died, initially thought to be a result of the Heart Punch. However, it was later revealed that Gunkel had suffered a heart attack, likely exacerbated by a heavy meal before the match, rather than the effects of Baker's finishing move. Despite these incidents being ruled as unrelated to Baker's actions in the ring, the mythos surrounding the Heart Punch grew. Baker, ever the showman, played into the fearsome reputation of his finisher, even as he privately grappled with the unfortunate association with these deaths. Baker was a performer who entertained crowds with his villainous character, yet his name became entwined with real-life tragedy, just like Chris, who left his family with an indelible heartache. Chris Kanyon.
You gotta wonder what role first time around, and how many times?
Chris Kanyon, remembered for his innovative offense and the catchphrase, "Who better than Kanyon?", was a wrestler who shone brightly in the twilight of WCW and during the tumultuous Invasion angle in WWE. His ability to captivate audiences with his unique style and charisma made him a standout performer, a wrestler seemingly destined for a storied career. In WCW, Kanyon was a mid-carder who was part of some of the company's most intriguing storylines. His creativity in the ring and his willingness to take risks with his character earned him a dedicated following. As WCW's days waned, Kanyon's star appeared to be on the rise, culminating in a prominent role during the much-hyped Invasion storyline following WWE's acquisition of WCW. However, the end of the Invasion angle marked the beginning of a downward trajectory for Kanyon's career. Injuries plagued him, and he struggled to find his place in the WWE landscape. Eventually, the company released him, and Kanyon found himself navigating the uncertain waters of the independent circuit. The struggles continued for Kanyon after his wrestling career ended. The physical toll of the ring, coupled with personal battles, led to a decline in his mental health. In a tragic turn of events, Kanyon's life came to an abrupt end when he was found dead, having consumed a lethal amount of antidepressants. He left behind a note for his family, a heartbreaking epilogue to a life and career that had once held so much promise. WWE acknowledged Kanyon's death, a somber recognition of a wrestler whose life after the spotlight had been fraught with challenges. The world of wrestling will not be quick to forget Test, who didn't stand the test of time because of his inner demons. Test, born Andrew Martin, was a towering figure in the WWE during the Attitude Era, known for his chiseled physique and his role as the enforcer for Mr. McMahon's corporation. With his imposing stature and power moves, Test seemed poised for greatness, a potential main eventer who could dominate the wrestling world. He had the looks, the skills, and the presence that made him a standout in a roster of stars. During his tenure with WWE, Test was involved in high-profile storylines, including a memorable engagement angle with Stephanie McMahon. Despite these opportunities, Test's career plateaued, and he found himself unable to break through the glass ceiling into the upper echelons of the company. A series of injuries further hampered his progress, leading to his release from WWE. Test's post-WWE career saw him venture into other wrestling promotions, including a stint in ECW and TNA. However, the glory days of the Attitude Era were behind him, and he eventually retired from professional wrestling. The transition away from the ring was a difficult one for Test, and he struggled to find his footing in a life devoid of the adrenaline and adulation that came with being a WWE superstar. In 2009, the wrestling community was shocked to learn of Test's untimely death. An overdose of oxycodone, a powerful painkiller, was the cause, and it was later revealed that Test had been suffering from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, a brain condition associated with repeated concussions. WWE's failure to publicly acknowledge his passing added a layer of controversy to the already tragic circumstances. Test's story is a life spent in the squared circle, where the physical toll can be as significant as the fame it brings. Chris Hawley.
Crash is
Born Michael Lockwood was a wrestler who brought a unique blend of comedy and competitiveness to the WWE's hardcore division. With his super heavyweight gimmick, where he humorously claimed to weigh over 400 pounds, Crash became a beloved figure among fans. His dedication to the Hardcore Championship's 24/7 rule, which stipulated that the title could be contested at any time and place, provided some of the most entertaining segments in WWE programming. Crash's ability to engage audiences with his comedic timing and underdog persona made him a standout performer.
Oh, man! Face first! Crash hooks the leg. There's two, and Saturn gets the shoulder up.
He was a multiple-time hardcore champion, and his feuds and alliances, particularly with his on-screen cousin Hardcore Holly, were highlights of the Attitude and Post-Attitude eras. Beyond the hardcore title, Crash also captured the WWE European and Light Heavyweight Championships, showcasing his versatility as a performer. Despite his success, Crash's tenure with WWE came to an end in 2003. The release from the company he had called home for several years sent him into a downward spiral. The transition away from the spotlight proved difficult for Crash, and he struggled to cope with life outside the WWE. Tragically, just a few months after his release, Crash Holly's life came to a premature end. He was found dead at the home of fellow wrestler Stevie Richards, surrounded by empty bottles of prescription medication and alcohol. The cause of death was ruled as choking on his own vomit, a heartbreaking conclusion to the life of a wrestler who had once brought so much joy to fans around the world. His passing left a void in the wrestling community, and his legacy as an entertainer and innovator in the hardcore division endures. Chris Von Erich, the youngest son of the legendary Von Erich wrestling family, a dynasty that left an indelible mark on the sport. Despite his family's storied legacy in the squared circle, Chris's journey was fraught with personal challenges and unfulfilled aspirations. Unlike his brothers, who achieved considerable success, Chris struggled to carve out his own niche in the wrestling world. Standing at a modest 5 feet 6 inches and lacking the imposing physique of his siblings, Chris faced an uphill battle from the outset. His passion for wrestling was undeniable, but his physical limitations, including brittle bones that were prone to breaking, hindered his ability to perform at the level expected of a Von Erich. Chris's in-ring career was marked by sporadic appearances and a series of minor feuds, never reaching the heights his family name suggested. The weight of the Von Erich legacy and his own struggles within the industry took a heavy toll on Chris's mental health. The family had already been struck by tragedy with the premature deaths of his brothers, and the so-called Von Erich curse became a source of immense pressure and pain for Chris. In a tragic turn of events, Chris took his own life in 1991, just 18 days shy of his 22nd birthday. His death added another chapter to the tragic narrative of the Von Erich family. Chris's inability to live up to the expectations set by his family's success and his physical limitations ultimately led to a heartbreaking end. Surprisingly, there's another Von Erich brother on the list, Kerry Von Erich. Known as the Texas Tornado, he was a star whose natural charisma and in-ring prowess earned him a place among wrestling's elite. As a member of the storied Von Erich family, Kerry carried on the legacy with a magnetic presence that captivated fans around the world. His most notable achievement came in the form of the coveted WWE Intercontinental Championship, a testament to his skill and popularity. However, Kerry's life outside the ring was marred by personal struggles and tragedy. In 1986, he was involved in a motorcycle accident that severely injured his right foot. Despite the injury, Kerry's determination saw him return to the ring, even competing after his foot was partially amputated, a fact he kept hidden from most fans and fellow wrestlers. The physical pain and the pressure to perform at the highest level began to take a toll on Kerry. He grappled with substance abuse, a battle that compounded the emotional pain of losing his brothers to various tragic circumstances. The weight of these personal demons grew heavier with time, and Kerry found himself unable to escape the shadow of what had come to be known as the Von Erich curse. In 1993, Kerry's internal struggles culminated in a heartbreaking decision. He took his own life on his family's ranch in Texas, leaving behind a legacy tinged with both brilliance and sorrow. His death was a profound loss to the wrestling world and served as a stark reminder of the fragility of those who live their lives in the spotlight. Kerry Von Erich's story is one of triumph and tragedy, a narrative that reflects the highs and lows of a life spent in the wrestling industry. His memory endures in the hearts of fans. To wrap it up, I bring you Sean O'Haire, one who amid his successes did little to solidify his legacy. Sean O'Haire.
That is the reason why I did not upload yesterday. But in the meantime, I did work on CM Punk's tutoring video.
His imposing physique and enigmatic persona was a wrestler who seemed destined for stardom. His early career in UCW showcased his potential, and when he transitioned to WWE, fans were captivated by his devil's advocate character, which promised a fresh and intriguing direction for his in-ring persona. O'Hare's athleticism and unique look made him stand out, and his martial arts background added a level of authenticity to his performances. Despite these attributes, his career in WWE did not reach the heights many had anticipated. After the Invasion storyline concluded, O'Hare struggled to find a lasting foothold in the company's storylines, and he eventually parted ways with WWE. Following his wrestling career, O'Hare ventured into the world of mixed martial arts, where he found moderate success. His transition to MMA seemed to be a positive move, one that allowed him to channel his competitive spirit in a new arena. However, beneath the surface, O'Hare was battling personal demons that would ultimately prove overwhelming. In 2014, the wrestling world was stunned by the news of O'Hare's death. He was found in his home, having taken his own life. Reports surfaced that he had been struggling with depression and substance abuse, issues that he had been unable to overcome despite his outward successes. His death highlighted the importance of mental health awareness and the need for support systems for those transitioning out of the wrestling industry. O'Hare's story, marked by unfulfilled potential and personal struggle, is a poignant chapter in the complex narrative of professional wrestling's impact on its performers. Unfortunately, the struggles these wrestlers faced limited their potential. Where and how they may have ended without the tragedy remains a theory. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to click on the card showing on the screen.